Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. Today, my guest is Bill Smith III, who has been involved with his family business for over 30 years now, going back to his summer work as a young teenager to more recently serving as a past president and current director and advisor to the business. His family's business, Royal Cup Coffee and Tea, has been in the family since his grandfather bought the company in 1950. In 2014, Bill was promoted to the president and CEO role, following his uncle and moving their business to him as a third-generation leader. In his leadership, Royal Cup completed a large-scale infrastructure project and launched a major and strategic rebranding initiative. At the end of this past decade, they, as a family and their board, jointly decided to promote from within and hand the business over to a non-family and professional executive team charged with leading the next phase of growth and success of the family business. Hey, so Bill, welcome to the show. It's great to have a G3 leader on the show.
I'm glad to be here, Jonathan. Thanks for the invite.
All right. And so we're going to talk a lot about your family business and obviously how it's led you into now doing consulting through your company, Double Iron Consulting, which is focused on serving small and medium-sized businesses and family business owners, just like I do, helping them to clarify and achieve their goals, and helping them navigate the transition from family-owned success. I'd love to let's hear a little bit of the backstory. First of all, where is Royal Cup Coffee and Tea? What do they do today? And how has that changed over the years?
Well, Royal Cup today is a national roaster and distributor of fine coffees and teas, literally across the country, primarily to restaurants, hotels, resorts, as well as offices. And it's a very proud family business. We've grown it since 1950 from being a Alabama-based and Alabama company to really a national provider to a lot of large-scale chains and customers and well-known resorts. So we're very proud of it. We believe strongly in high-quality coffees, and we're very thankful to the many customers and consumers who appreciate our fine products.
Has it always been in the niche of like hotels and office rooms? Has that been your niche, or has that changed over time?
That's a great question, Jonathan. So when my grandfather bought the business in 1950, it was primarily a grocery company at the time, a coffee company serving grocery stores. That was in the 1950s and early 1960s. That predominantly was how coffee companies were set up. When my father came down and joined the business in the late 1960s, he and then later my uncle, who joined the business in the early 1970s, the two of them realized the strategic advantage of moving the business away from grocery and into the food service and ultimately office coffee space. And with my father's emphasis on strategy and vision, and with my uncle's salesmanship and his tenacity for acquiring customers, the two of them together really established a national game plan. And that's what took Royal Cup beyond the state of Alabama and really beyond the South, and ultimately led to Royal Cup being a nationwide provider of fine coffees and teas across both food service and office coffee platforms.
Okay, now my next question is, coffee and tea has evolved quite a bit over the years. The sophistication in people's palates or tastes, the introduction of a $4 or $5 cup of coffee from Starbucks. There are tea companies that are really having have expanded their brand. Also, I think with globalization, our access to coffees and teas far away. Have you found that over the years you've had to follow a similar path of expanding all of your coffee and tea offerings?
Jonathan, that's a great question. So as consumers became more and more interested in the higher quality coffee offerings, Royal Cup, certainly, we had to pivot the company and emphasize our high quality coffee. And we did that through a number of different methods over the years. In particular, during my role as third generation president and CEO, we invested heavily in the capability and capacity of our campus, and most importantly, made a commitment to a strategic rebranding of our products so that we could capitalize on consumers' interest in the higher, more specialty grade coffees. And we're very proud of that. So yes, very excited to see the consumer thoroughly enjoy excellent coffees, and Royal Cup is well positioned to serve those customers and consumers today because of our investments.
I'm sure it's a very competitive industry, and we can go into that, and maybe we'll come back to that in a few minutes, because coffee, for most part, for many people, was considered a commodity. Again, I think Starbucks and similar companies sort of exploded that idea of it being a commodity, and I know some of the finer teas that I like to drink, it's anything but a commodity. But let's get into the story from the generational perspective. Let's start with first. Do you know why your grandpa bought the business instead of starting a business from scratch? Was he not the entrepreneur founder that maybe my grandfather or some other people were? Because I've had some clients who have very nice, successful family businesses, and they also bought the business. And it's a different thing than starting it from scratch. So what's your sense on the history there?
Well, my grandfather definitely was both a salesman and, I believe, an entrepreneur. And I think in the 1950s, because of the availability of a couple of coffees in the Birmingham, companies in the Birmingham area, the coffee company was available and ready to be bought by someone like him. And so he worked closely with friends of his and together pooled the financial resources and was able to acquire the business rather than personally invest in the creation of a new company. So I look back on his decision as a wonderful decision for our family. And I'm very thankful that he chose to buy and really start the next chapter of this coffee company.
And so what was then the transition from him to your father? How old was your father? What was the impetus to make the transition? Sometimes it's, something tragic. Hopefully it wasn't in this case, but what was the impetus to make the transition? And did your father ever talk to you about what that transition was like?
We've talked about it, in family sessions at the dinner table and everything that most family businesses and families have the opportunity to do. My father came down from Minnesota at a time period when my grandfather, his father, had contracted lung cancer. And so it was a situation where my grandfather's health necessitated my father to change his plans, change his career, and come down and support not just the family, attending to his father and his mother, but also attending to the business. The business was very small at that time and needed the tenacity of the family members, in particular my father, to step forward and take charge of the business during my grandfather's failing health due to lung cancer. And that really, left a huge mark on our family. And through my father's investment in the family business, we were able to create a successful path. And so I look back on that and am glad that my grandfather bought the business. And I'm also very glad that my father made the decisions that he did to support the business and to turn it on its growth path.
How old was he at the time?
He was in his late 20s.
Okay.
So 26, 27.
Was it coming back home? Like, it sounds like he was in Minnesota, so he was coming back home to where he had family?
Yes. So he was working with General Mills at the time in a strategic leadership position. And when he got the call, he and my mom left Minnesota, came back to Birmingham, Alabama, which was my father's hometown, and got, threw himself into the business. And we're very thankful of that.
And when was there a transition of ownership from your grandfather to your father at some point in time? If so, like, when did that happen? And what did your father have to do to earn that?
Well, it was a lot of strategic vision and actions on my father's behalf. So in the late 1960s and early 1970s, he worked closely with his mother and developed the stock ownership transitions that moved the business from his parents to him, and then ultimately also to my uncle, who was very active in the business when he graduated from college and came into it in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. And then from there forward, a large credit to both my father and uncle for seeing the opportunities for my generation to get involved in business when we were in our teenage years. And of course, I took full advantage of that. But a big credit to my father in particular for being the person who took strategy seriously and put a plan together to see the company continue to grow and create the opportunity for third generation family leadership.
So tell us about now the transition from your father to you. What was that like? When did that happen? Again, what did you have to, like, and tell us also about your joining the business. So tell us a little about your history,
Sure.
What that looks like.
Sure. So when I was 16, that was my first opportunity to work full time during the summer. And I learned how to roast coffee, package coffee, pull orders in the warehouse, and then also work closely with our sales team in the Birmingham market. It was a great exposure for me. I certainly grabbed hold of how passionate we are about the beverage itself. It was an opportunity and a wonderful opportunity to learn how to drink coffee black, where you can truly taste the coffee. And so I remember that vividly. But it was important for me as a leader in the third generation of the family to really immerse myself into the business in all aspects of the business. That was something that both my father and my uncle did when they were younger. And so they really held that as a strong value, that if our business was going to be successful over multiple generations, that each generation member who wanted to work in the business needed to have exposure through all aspects of it. And so I look back on that time during my high school summers and my college summers, and then in my early professional years, really having the opportunity to touch many different aspects from the operations side, which is where we roast and package the coffee, to the logistics and the supply chain side, making sure the deliveries from our Birmingham production center make it to our field sales, And then most importantly, and this was something that my uncle really took strong emphasis to, and that was being engaged with the direct relationship with our customers. And so I remember vividly running multiple coffee routes where I would start my mornings early and be at the customer's site very early in the morning and having that direct contact with our customers, both in Birmingham and Atlanta, as well as other parts of the country. So I credit my uncle with a lot of wise decisions in terms of emphasizing the value of customer relationships and knowing the customer firsthand.
Right. So, I think that it's really challenging oftentimes for predecessors to let go. And they're challenged with, like, which is the child that should be running this business or could be, or do they have the interest? Sometimes it's very obvious, but oftentimes it may not be so obvious. And the difficulty of letting go and enjoying the ride while the next generation rises to power. Have you seen this in your business, your family business, or in any other businesses that you've worked with?
Certainly. And our family has certainly been active in all aspects of that. As I mentioned earlier, my father came down during my grandfather's lung cancer, and so that was out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
And so he stepped forward out of necessity. I credit my father and my uncle figuring out a way to work together, where my father, as the person who chose strategy for the company, he wisely saw the success that my uncle could have as the chief salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And so the two of them figured out a way to work together, where my father emphasized the strategic planning aspect of the business, and my uncle took full charge of being the chief salesperson and going after and growing the business and turning it from a regional player into a nationwide player.
Right.
Ultimately, that created a wonderful customer platform for our business. And then my role, credit to my operational background and going to business school and learning a lot about organization and management and also capital planning. My role was to come in and really build out the infrastructure of the company's business so that we could more efficiently and profitably support the nationwide set of customers that my uncle, prior to me, had established, for our business. And many, many people get credit, for all of their hard work through those years. So it's certainly
Right.
not just my uncle or my father, and certainly not me. There are plenty of people who get credit, but that gives you an idea for how
Mm-hmm.
our business transitioned from
Mm-hmm.
one generation to the next. It wasn't always a wonderful ride because family members have strong opinions.
Sure.
And so we had to figure out how to balance that. And we didn't always agree. And we had to figure out how to work through that. And thankfully, we did. And I'm excited for the future growth opportunities the company has, based on our ability to work together.
Was there a theme in the challenge in the terms of the transfer? Or was it like the conversations or the arguments are mostly around equity and transfer of ownership, or no, the conversation is mostly around power. Who's going to be who's going to be calling the shots? Who's going to be providing the strategic direction? Would you say was there a central theme, one of those or something else?
I would say that it was not one thing in particular. I think we all, fortunately, all of us as active family members wanted to see the company continue to grow. And so we had that in common. Where we had different points of view is how best to see that growth happen on a year-to-year basis. And that's probably where we had differing opinions that we had to work through. My uncle was very motivated to see the customer growth. I was very motivated to see the infrastructure receive the investments necessary to support that growth. And so we didn't always see eye to eye on how best to prioritize the company's resources. But I'm proud of the fact that, when we promoted from within and tapped the non-family executive team to come forward, I'm very proud of the fact that we as a family figured out the best way to establish a national platform for that non-family executive team to take charge and take the company to its next phase of growth.
And Bill, did your company have a board prior to outside folks, or I shouldn't necessarily say outside folks, but people who were promoted from within to take over the direction of the company? Well, I mean, was there a board that was in place for a long time before that? And so that would be one question. Was there a board in place that was like and was it a family board or was it a mixed board? Tell us a little about the history of the board, the composition of it.
Well, Jonathan, thank you for asking that question. If in my role now, I believe strongly in the value of boards. And throughout my professional career in the family business, we always had a formal board that served the company with the value of having an outside governing body attend to the success and growth of the business. And thankfully, that board, and it was a wise decision primarily on my father's behalf, to have a board that had both family members as well as non-family external directors. And it was a formal board that met quarterly and then also had annual shareholder meetings. So I believe the long-term success and growth of Royal Cup, our family business, was in part attributable to the fact that we had good governance through a formal board. Mm-hmm. And when I have the opportunity to visit with other family businesses through my new role now, I'm a huge advocate for having some type of board working to serve the business. That can be a formal board or it can be an advisory board. But there's tremendous value. And I look back on Royal Cup's experiences, and I'm very thankful that we had that in place with such regularity.
Do you think that the size of the board is really important? Like, do you believe that it should be 5, 7, 11, a small number? Should it be an odd number? Is there a composition of family, non-family? What's your thoughts on that?
Thank you for that, Jonathan. The quantity of members or the size of the board, I don't look at that as importantly as I look at the right balance of board members. I believe you have to juggle having the right number of family participants as well as non-family. So I do believe in the value of having an odd number where family members can understand and appreciate their influence and their control, but then also having the non-family external directors so that you have the true benefit of an objective outsider who can help the family see where the company is going without being distracted by the family lens. And so I definitely recognize that that's probably the priority that I would emphasize, is having that balance of family and non-family.
And I assume that as a group or as a family, you would vote whether people should be admitted or invited onto the board. That's my assumption. And that the CEO, I mean, it's been my experience that the CEO wields a pretty strong hand or influence over the choosing of who the board members are. What's your thoughts on that in terms of the influence of the board, how far reaching it can be, the CEO's role in choosing and selecting people, the family's role in selecting and choosing people?
Well, I think it depends on where the family business is in its stage of development. In our family's business, for a very long time, I would say that my father's generation, had much more influence on who was going to be a part of the board itself. As we look ahead, I believe in the transition from one generation to the next, and the stage of the business will determine how that board evolves. Presently, the Royal Cup board is a seasoned board with outside directors who are more representative of the older generation. And so when we look ahead, our family is contemplating how does that board evolve to represent perspectives that are more akin to the younger generation. Mm-hmm. I think in other family businesses, maybe family businesses that have a longer history or are more complex with multiple generations beyond just two, I think the CEO, particularly if it's a non-family CEO, should have a lot of influence on how the board is established and functioning, so that the CEO has the right support and also has the right advice so that he or she can effectively serve the family's interest and, importantly, deliver the success that the business calls for.
Great. I'm going to share my screen for those who are watching on YouTube. And I'm going to share my 7 P's playbook framework. You got a chance to read my book, Disruptive Successor, where I present this 7 P's framework. That I said every business, every family business in particular, needs to look at when they're scaling up a business. And you had an 8th P. But before I ask you to talk about the 8th P, I just want to remind people, most people probably aren't familiar with what my 7 P's framework is, but it starts with purpose. It then goes into planning. It's then a discussion of your products or services and how you are going to refresh those products or services. The people, do you have the right people? Are they in the right seats? What are the priorities? What processes need to be documented and followed by all? And then, what is the performance in terms of the financial performance? You had an 8th P you recommended. Can you tell us what that was and, what your thoughts on it were?
Sure, Jonathan. And of course, I have a large influence from being so wrapped up in a family business for 25 plus years. An 8th P that I would encourage and promote would be the concept of partnering. When you have multiple generations involved in a family business in particular, the value of partnering with across generations and with key family members really goes a long way toward determining the success, not only of the transition, but the success of the business as a whole. And I'm not just talking about the family member success. I'm talking about everyone who's in a key position, both family and non-family. When you have a strong sense of partnership that ripples throughout the culture of the business, that has a tremendous, both tangible and intangible effect on the business. So if you were asking me to add another P, an 8th P, as you said, I would put partnering up there for your readers.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I can only imagine the importance of partnerships in your family's business. I know it was in my grandfather and their family's business. I mean, right? You're only as good as your partnerships with your employees, your customers, your distribution channel partners, all of your financial partners, right? Your bankers, your lenders, as well as your outside professional relationship partners. So I think it's a great contribution, and I'll have to think about that if and when I write the next book. So
happy to share that perspective.
Love it. So now you've more recently transitioned from the family business and you've launched your own consulting company called Double Iron Consulting. You did that last year. And what's your involvement at this point then with the business? Are you strictly in a board role? Do you have very limited? I mean, how many hours a week or a month do you focus on Royal Cup coffee and tea?
Well, my active role is that to be an effective and supportive board member, in addition to being a shareholder. And so I take pride in my ability to support the business by being an active board member and someone who thinks about strategy and then is available to share insights based on my prior leadership roles. I also view my role is to be supportive of the current leadership team and executive team. And by being supportive, that means offering insights. And it also means offering space because one important aspect of a transition is that you respect the next person in the next group coming in and you give them the space and the support so that they truly can be effective in carrying the business forward. So that's my role with Royal Cup. It's created this opportunity with my double iron consulting journey, and I'm excited about the path that I'm taking with it.
So, my book and my show have the title Disruptive Successor. And I think anyone who's handing their business over to a next generation might be a little concerned about how disruptive that successor is. What is let's talk about for a few minutes as we start to wind down, the fine line between being disruptive and creating that's counterproductive, and disruptive that's productive and leads to breakthroughs in all sorts of areas, whether it be products, markets, relationships. What are your thoughts on the fine line between being a disruptor and being disruptive?
Well, when you as a leader grab hold of the baton and you recognize that it's your time to lead, I think you have to be honest with the state of the business, and you have to understand what's in the best interest of the business and how do I invest my time, effort, and resources into doing what is right for the business. And we had our own experiences in our family business where we needed to invest in the capability and capacity of our infrastructure. And we also had to invest in a rebranding so that the business could grow forward. And so to be an effective leader, I think you have to be honest with the state of the business, and then you have to be bold and committed to carry through and make necessary decisions. Oftentimes, those decisions are not easy and certainly not popular, particularly in a family business where you have multiple generations and a more senior or older generation is very much invested in what he or she or they did. And you as the next person or the next generation coming in have to realize that there's their due respect, but at the same time, the business needs what it truly needs to move forward. And that's your role as the next person carrying the baton, is to be willing and committed and convicted to make those difficult decisions and carry them forward.
Yeah. All right, Bill, do you have a book in you? Is it, and if so, are you working on it? What's the working title? Or
I don't have a working title as of yet, Jonathan, but
okay.
I do believe in the value of journaling. Mm-hmm. And as I continue to do my journaling on a regular basis, my hope is that in due time, there will be a book that I can add to your bookshelf back there.
All right. So is there a favorite book of yours that you like to give out to clients or a favorite podcast or blog or something that you think is like really helpful to the people that you work with?
I think it's important that we always continue to read from multiple perspectives.
Yes.
So I don't have the one book. I think Jim Collins has got a great number of books. Mm-hmm. Malcolm Gladwell's got great perspectives. I know you've got Traction. I think that's a great book. I think there are many books out there. And I think as a leader, I think our obligation to ourselves and to our own professional development is that we're an active reader and that we commit ourselves to continuous learning. Yeah. So that's where I am right now.
I agree with you. Vern Harnish, author of the book Scaling Up, says leaders are readers and leaders are learners. And I couldn't agree with you more. So, well, Bill, thanks so much for being on the show. And if people want to get a hold of you, is the best way is that to email you at wesmith@doubleironconsulting.com or?
Yes, Jonathan, that is a great way to be in touch with me, that and through my website, Double Iron Consulting.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for being on the show with me today. And folks, thanks for listening to us rap about Bill Smith's business, Royal Cup Coffee and Tea. Check him out at doubleironconsulting.com. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.